Hello everyone, hope you are doing well. So now we are going to understand finally block and custom exception. Okay, what is the use of finally block and what is a custom exception? That could be topic for this particular session. So let's understand that finally block and what is a custom exception. So first we'll go with the finally block only. So we know that we have seen that to handle the exception, right? We have seen three things, right? One is a try catch block. Second will be throws keyword, and third will be finally block. So these are the three that we have seen to handle the exception. Try catch we have already covered, right? So inside the try we do write the code which does throw the exceptions, and here in the catch what do we write? We do write the code. We do write the code, right? Which will display after the exception, after the exception raise, after the exception raised, right? So in the try block I will always write the code that will give the exception, but in the catch block we do write the code that does display if exception does raise, actually if the exception does come, right? And the finally block is also one of the block that will come with the try catch only. That will come with the try catch only. But in the finally block, we do write the cleanup code. The cleanup code. What does it mean, cleanup code? Okay, let me explain you that. Okay, so let me create a new class here. Say like test3. And here also I'm keeping suppose main method. Okay, so I am writing a one scenario here, like for example int of equal to, or let me take one scenario like string s equal to say like null. Okay, it will give a null value only, and here I will keep like try block, and in the try what I will do here, I will keep check the length of it. So I am just simple writing system dot out dot println, right? I will write here s dot length, that will give me null pointer exception, right? And I will write here like catch block. In the catch block I can keep like null pointer exception, right? And here what I will do here, I can write like e dot print stack trace, and here I can use like finally block. So sometime what happen, right, after raising the exception, like for example here I have to write some other code like sysout system.out.println, say like hello. Okay, simply I'm writing, okay, system.out.println, say like fine. In the try block, please try to understand what I want to explain. Okay, one of the important part. So in try block, if I will write string s equal to null, it will directly come to the try block. Right, in the try block what happen, the first line this will be execute s dot length. So s dot length will calculate the length of the string. String having a null value, null means nothing. If it is nothing, that means it will not calculate the length. If it will not calculate the length, it will directly give me null pointer exception. So after this line number 7, it will directly jump to the line number 10 only, and then line number 10 will have a null pointer exceptions, and here it will come directly e dot print stack trace, and it will give the message like string contain the null value, which could be technical message that will give by the JVM itself, right? But here you can see here after that the finally block will not be executed, right? I mean finally block will execute. First we have to understand, right? I mean I'm saying this two line will not be executed. So let me re-explain once again, right? If string s equal to null, right, then what upon this line will be give exception. After that I am directly getting it is directly coming to the catch block, and the catch block will execute here, and then the remaining two line number 8 and line number 9 will not be executed. But some of the scenario, if I want to execute line number 8 and line number 9 as well, then I will use a finally block. So finally block is a block which will execute always, right? Doesn't means exception will come or not. Let me repeat it once again. So if try block will execute, if the try will give some any exception, right, it will directly come to the catch block. and catch block will execute. If some of the code we want to execute after the exception as well, after the exception raised as well, right? That could be mandatory code. That code we can keep under the finally block. So finally block is a block which will execute. I mean, it is a block. So let me here, instead of print stack trace, I can simply write system dot out dot println, and here I can keep like some string contain null value, string contain null value, okay, and here I can simply write plus string contain null value plus I can say here like as dot get message. So not as, e dot get message, right? E is exception, e dot get message, right? So if you want like in this scenario, what am I, right? Let me keep it. What's the use of finally, right? It will always execute. It will always execute, right? So catch will not be execute always. Catch will only execute, like for example, if I will keep here suppose like hello or like suppose hi. So if s is having a hi, right, that time this line will give me the 2 and this both line also will execute because there is no exception here. So if I will run this code, right, you can see here this catch is not going to execute. So catch will execute only when the exception does read. So here as we have a high rate, so this line itself will give me s dot length because it is having a value, so it will give me a 2 and then hello fine will execute, right? But if it is having a null value, right, then only it does throw the exception and then only this catch block will execute. But it is not a finally scenario here. Finally will say that it will execute always. It will execute always doesn't means it is exception come or not, right? So here let me write this. It will execute always and we do keep the code. We do keep the code here, right? Which we want to execute. We do keep the code which we want to execute. Execute in all cases. All cases means exception come or not, right? And sometimes we do call finally it is used to write the cleanup code. Finally is used to write the cleanup code. So whenever you want to write the cleanup code, then we can go with the finally block, right? So like for example, I'm thinking it suppose it's like cleanup code, okay? It not like this actually. Normally cleanup code means like suppose I'm using files or I'm using database connection, right? Later on you will understand that what is a database connection. So if you have opened some connection, we have to close it, right? So sometime what happen, right? If you will run the code, if you open the connection, right, that may not be closed if you will keep this under the try block. So that cleanup code that closing connection type of code, close the file, that code we do keep under the finally block, right? Or the code which you want to execute in all the scenarios, doesn't mean exception come or not, that code we do keep under the finally block, right? So this time what happened, right, s dot length will raise the exception, it will come directly to the catch block, and after that this finally will start the execution and finally will give me hello and fine. So this time you can see here I'm getting this catch message because here the try will give directly exception, right? And after that catch will execute. So it will giving the message and then directly it is coming to the finally block like hello and fine. Now suppose if it is not having a null, it is having a suppose like this one like hi. Then what happen? This time there is no exception here, right? It will give me 2 only. And after that this catch will not execute but finally will execute. So this time you can see here what I will get. I will get 2 hello and fine. So finally we are executing the previous scenario where the exception was there and that scenario as well where we do not have any exception. So finally block is a block which will execute always, right? Which will execute always. So try with length and then we have a finally block with the message like that. Okay. Now if you don't have a catch block, right? So try can be write with the finally block as well. That is also one question. Can we write try without catch? Can we write try without catch? Yeah, we can write it. We can write the try without catch, but that will become with the finally only. that will come with the finally only, right? If no finally, then try cannot be alone. So try can be merged with catch block or with finally block, right? Try cannot be alone. Try cannot be alone, right? Try can come with a finally or try can come with a catch block. So that is also one interview questions like that. Clear it? So finally is a one block which will execute always. Doesn't mean exception come or not. It will execute always, right? So if you will run this code, right? If you run this code, you can get 2 hello and fine, right? If it is having exception also, that time also it will execute. If we'll keep null here, right? That time also it does say okay, null pointer exception, and directly it will come to this finally block, right? So that is a use of finally block actually. So that time it is directly giving me an exception, right? And hello fine also will execute. Okay. So these are the some scenarios. This is the one scenario where we can use the finally block, right? So first thing that we have to understand the use of finally block. So finally block is a block which will execute always. That will come with the try, right? That will come with the try. So we can use try catch finally, or we can go with the try with finally also. Okay, both scenario will work, right? Now let's understand one more scenario here. Let me create one class, say like test4. Okay, let's say here I am writing a one main method, right? So suppose if I am writing the code here, let me write here some try block. In the try block, what I am doing, first I am keeping this or let me one thing after that, before try, let me write some variable string str equal to say like null. Okay, and here I am keeping like a string only, right? Let's take one more scenario here, like for example, okay, I think this scenario will not be fit on it, right? So let's do understand. We do keep that scenario. I have a try block, right? We have two things, string str equal to null and int x equal to like 100, right? And here I'm using a one object class. Let's say I'm using here object, or let's say this. Okay, I am writing here like one test4 class object, test4 t equal to new object. So we know that in case of inheritance, it is not possible. It is not possible, right? Why? Because object is a parent class and test4 is a child class, right? So for sake of that, I'm just doing the typecast. So what I'm doing here, I'm using like test4, right? So if I will keep the test4, that time it is giving me a what is the problem? I think we have to keep it before some syntax issue. Look, let me check it once. Yeah. So this time what happened, right? It is saying that new object we are converting into a test4. So that is called typecasting, right? Typecasting is also one, like it is having a like narrowing. I mean, narrowing and widening, these are the two things. So here we are doing narrowing. Narrowing means what? Let me keep it so that name you will not confuse. NARROWING, narrowing. Narrowing what? We are doing upper to a lower. So we have some upper objects, and upper objects we are assigning into a lower object, because object is a parent class of all this, right? We have seen that in the previous videos. So this object cannot be come under the test4. Now here, suppose if I will do some kind of t dot say to string, see what will happen here. See what will happen here. If I will run this code, it will directly give me a exception that object cannot be cast to the class where we do get class cast exception, right? Now here, suppose if I will write some, so in this scenario, right? In this scenario, when we have a like parent class as object into a child class, and if we are using that, right, that time it is a class cast exception, right? It is a class cast exception, right? So class here you don't get message, cannot cast to the class, right? And here we can get this message. Let me write here some message as well, so we can understand in a better way. Like object cannot inside test4 class, inside test4 class. Okay, so this time what will happen? Let's see. You can see here object cannot inside the test4 class, and after that it will start the technical message. So what I want to say that this line will give me one exception, which is a class cast exception, right? That is one of the interview question. When do we get class cast exception? So class cast exception will become if we have a like parent class under the child class, parent class under the child class, then only we do get class cast exception, right? Because it's not possible. For sake of compilation, we did the typecast. So for compilation, we'll understand, but for execution purpose, it is not possible. So that is doing kind of narrowing only here, right? So this is giving one exception, as well as I'm writing one more code, like for example, system dot out dot println, and here I'm keeping suppose str dot length. So this time I have two kind of code here. One will throw that exception, second can throw this exception, right? So this will throw like class cast exception, and that is throwing kind of null pointer exception, right? So which exception should I keep under the catch block? Class cast exception or null pointer exception? Which should I keep? So on that scenario, if you are thinking your try catch may throw multiple exception, right? So if you do not know exact exception class name, we can keep it here exception only. We can keep the exception only. So exception class is a class which is a parent of all the classes, right? We have seen that in the diagram also, like here itself. If you can see here, we have seen, I think that you can see in the previous recording, right? We have given, I have given that example where we have seen like exception is a parent of all the exception classes. So here, if we are giving more than one exception, right, then what should be right under the catch block? So that time we do keep exception only. So that will catch first or that will catch the second. Both it will catch it. Both it will catch it. So always remember that in the exception class, right, we do keep either the same exception which is throwing by the code, and or we do keep exception also. Both will be fine for that. No problem on it. Okay, no problem on it. Clear it? So in the catch block, we can keep exception, or we can keep the exact exception which is throwing by the try block also, right? So in this scenario, if it is not, if first is throwing exception, it will catch. If second is throwing the exception, second will catch, right? So that I'm going to explain here. So in the catch block, either we can keep, or sometime we do have, it does also happen, right? Suppose I'm a new developer. I do not know what exception this code can throw. I don't know exactly what exception it can throw. So on that scenario also we do keep exception. So exception is a one kind of formula. If you do not know your code is throwing any kind of what kind of exception, right? You can keep exception under the catch block. It will catch all the kind of exception, right? So we have a two option under the catch block. Either I can keep the parent exception class name, or we can keep that exact exception class name also. Both will work fine. Right? So that we have seen that class cast exception scenario, right? Okay. And when do we get index out the bound exception? Okay. So this is clear, right? Now let's understand some scenario where we do get what kind of exceptions. Okay. Now let me create a new class as well, which could be test4 class. Test5 class. And here I'm keeping like a main method. So here we have like different exception, like arithmetic exception we have seen. When does it come? Arithmetic exception we have seen. Okay. And the previous scenario we have seen class cast exception as well, right? Class cast exception we have finished, right? Null pointer exception we have finished. Null pointer. These are the exception which is very popular. We have n number of exception, right? All exception will difficult to cover, right? But yeah, the common exception which is coming, that we can understand, right? Next we have like index out of bound exception, or index out of bound exception. Index out of bound exception. So when does it come? When this exception will come? So that will come if we have a suppose one array. I'm creating a one integer array. Okay. And here I'm keeping some value inside it. Let's represent the array with the square bracket only, right? I'm keeping some value like 1, 2, 3, 4, something like that, right? And what I'm doing here I'm displaying system.out.println. So array indexing is starting with the 0. So first will be a 0 index, right? And then will be a 3 index. And here I'm keeping suppose ARR of suppose 10. So inside that we have how many index? It is starting from the 0 and ending at 3, and I'm here displaying 10th, right? So that time I will get our index out of bound exception. So if I will run this code, right, see here what I will get. I will get like array index out of bound exception, because we don't have an index of 10, right? We don't have index of 10. That time we do get our index out of bound exception, right? So these are the exception which we should know: arithmetic exception, class cast. Class cast will work on that scenario, right? That is one of the important questions, right, of the interview as well, right? Index out of bound exception also, that's the one scenario, right? So that way we can understand how and when this exception come, right? Clear it? So that is about this kind of exceptions scenarios. Now the last topic that we have to see about exception, called creating the custom exception, right? How to create the custom exception.